Now let's talk about business. In order to understand financial statement analysis, you really got to understand how companies work. And so it's important to really have a basic idea of how companies make money. And when you look at specific companies to analyze their financial statements, don't want to just look at the numbers and the ratios, but you really want to understand what environment is this company in, what's the company's approach to making money, what kind of company is this, and a lot of what we would call qualitative things about the company, and you can't ignore that qualitative information. There's something called Porter's value chain model, which gives you a pretty good picture and understanding of how companies work. And basically, you could look at it in terms of inputs and outputs. That there's certain things that go into the company and then there are certain things that come out. And there's a lot of things that have to happen inside in order for all of this to work. So the way the value chain model looks at it in terms of a series of operations that kind of work in sequence in order to make the company successful. So I'll go through this example. You have what's called inbound logistics. What do we need to come into the factory or the plant in order to make the goods? Operations may include manufacturing, all the things that happen inside the factory. And what a factory does is it takes raw materials and works on them so that you can produce finished goods. And that's what operations in a factory is all about. Outbound logistics is how you get the goods out of the factory and towards the customers. In other words, how do you get the goods already? How do you ship the goods and things like that? That would work hand in hand with marketing and sales. Marketing sales is all about how do you find the customer or identify the customers and sell your goods to your customers. And then servicing is all about what do you do after the customer buys the goods? How do you keep customers happy and satisfied with their purchases and sell them additional things that you might want to sell them? And these are called the primary activities. There's also support activities, which are the various things which have to happen inside the company in order to do all of your primary activities. So these can be classified in terms of infrastructure, resource management, technology, production development, and procurement. So we have these primary activities and support activities, and these are all supposed to generate for you, if you do a good job, they should all generate for you profit margin. And that's what you deliver then to your stockholders. And we want to consider the competitive environment because your company, there's all sorts of pressures on you coming from many, many different places. And you have to manage all of these different pressures or constituencies in order to run a successful company. So at the heart of the matter is your competitors. But you also need to work with suppliers, substitutes that would be other products that are similar to yours, which people could buy instead of yours, but they're not necessarily competitors. This particular company makes soft drinks. So it also happens to be that people may buy coffee instead of soft drinks. Buyers and entrants would be other possible companies that could potential competitors. And then there's an external environment that consists of all these other constituencies like the federal government, your stockholders, creditors, who also can impact your environment. So you need to take all of this into account when you're thinking about a company and trying to analyze their performance. Industry competition, your bargaining power of buyers. Some buyers have bargaining power, some do not. Bargaining power of suppliers. Sometimes a supplier's in a strong bargaining position, and that can make your life very difficult because that could raise the cost of your raw materials. Threat of substitution. You may have a successful product, but another product could come out that customers could use instead. A great example of this is Microsoft Windows. There was a time when Microsoft Windows was the predominant operating system, and no one could ever imagine a time or how any other product could possibly supplant Microsoft Windows, because everyone has Microsoft Windows on all their computers. And Apple OS was kind of considered like, for a toy. So no one could ever imagine a world where everyone didn't use Windows. And the Justice Department was investigating Microsoft for monopoly. And then slowly smartphones became popular. And Microsoft really never competed in smartphones. They had an operating system for smartphones, but it was a failure. And eventually what's happened is that Android and mobile devices have very much taken the place of desktops and laptops running Windows. So that would be an example of a substitution as opposed to competition. And threat of entry. Many people are in industries where there's a high barrier to entry and it would be difficult for another company to compete with you, like Microsoft Windows. On the other hand, there are businesses where it's really easy to compete. So if you start an internet business selling some kind of product, selling, food, that's a very competitive industry, and it's really easy to start up another business in that industry, and therefore it's highly competitive. When you're looking at your business, these are things, looking at a business to understand the profitability, these are all things that you want to think about. There's SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the way you would look at this is internal factors are strengths and weaknesses. In other words, what is it that you do very well and what is it you do very poorly? External factors are opportunities and threats. And when you're considering a company for investment, you really want to think about the SWOT analysis and think about what a company is good at and what a company is not necessarily good at. And think about if your company has a competitive advantage. I just had a cup of Starbucks coffee this morning, and I never had Verona, I think it is, Verona something. And I was thinking as I was drinking this cup of coffee, this tastes really good. So think about Starbucks for a second. What are Starbucks' competitive advantage? One is that it's just really good coffee. It tastes good. Another competitive advantage is that there's like a store in every block. You're always 5 or 10 minutes away from a Starbucks. You also have an incredibly loyal set of customers. So those would be what we would call competitive advantages. And you would ask yourself, is this sustainable? And if a company doesn't have a competitive advantage, then what can they do to develop a competitive advantage? Something that you can do better that your competitors will not be able to do. So some common competitive advantages, one would be what we call product differentiation, where you would make your product so much better in some way from your competitors that customers can see the difference. 3 ways to do that would be technological innovation, something unique about your product design, or marketing, distribution, after-sale customer support. For example, let's talk about Starbucks. It's very good coffee. That would be product design. And marketing, distribution. They're all over the place. A different approach would be what we call cost leader, that you would have the cheapest products. That's definitely not Starbucks. So if you're going to do that, then you need to know how to make and sell your product for less money than your competitors. For example, Walmart. Walmart as a company is a master, is better than anybody in the universe at selling things at the lowest possible price. And they're set up to do this. They continue to work on it. And this is why Walmart is so profitable, because they can get the product, buy the product, get it into the store, and sell it at the lowest cost and the lowest price of anybody. The other company that has the ability to do that, that's incredible at doing it, is Costco. Now, we talk about forecasting. This would be step 4 from the beginning of the class, as I was saying. Let's go back to there for a second. Step 3. I should edit the video and take it out, but I'm not going to do that. Step 3, forecasting financial information. You use all this information to create your forecast, and it's very, very difficult to do. And you take everything you know and you try to predict what's going to happen next. And to do this, you have to understand the business environment really well. You have to understand what makes the company ticks. You have to understand the competitors, other companies. And that's going to be the key to predicting what's going to happen next. The other thing is you have to make realistic assumptions that are achievable. You don't want to be too optimistic and you don't want to be too conservative. Step 4 is going to be business valuation. And you got to know where the company is, and you have to have good forecasts from step 3 in order to do this. The mechanics of doing it are actually very simple. But the value of a company is going to be the current value of all the future profits that the company is going to make. That's the real value of the company. So when you buy a stock, you're buying it on the assumption that you're going to make money in the future. So therefore, the more money you're going to make in the future, the more the stock is worth. Very simple. So what you need to do is you need to predict what's going to happen in the future and use that information to conclude what the company is worth now. And that's very, very difficult to do. But if you can do it well, then obviously you can make a lot of money. There's an interesting thing. And there's a theory that says that capital markets are efficient, and therefore every stock is valued based on all the information that's already available. So in other words, some people think the stock is more valuable and they buy it. Some think it's less valuable and they sell it. And so each stock reaches an optimal price that incorporates all of the information that's already available. And so if you take this to its logical conclusion, then there's no point in doing financial statement analysis at all, because it's already done by the market. In essence, if the market is automatically, by its processes, and if you've taken economics, you understand this, if the market by its process has correctly priced a stock, then you could pretty much buy any stock and assume that the market has already priced it in the most accurate way. And there's no point in doing anything. You could throw your textbook away now. It's called market efficiency. And the Wall Street Journal every quarter does a competition. They update it every quarter. They call it the dartboard competition. And what they do is they take 3 or 4 of the top analysts on Wall Street, and they take stock listings, they put them on a wall. Now I think they do it electronically, but they used to actually do it when the Wall Street Journal printed stock listings. They would post them on a big wall, and then they would throw darts, 3 or 4 darts, and pick a portfolio of 4 stocks. And you would think, well, the analysts had to do better than the dartboard, right? And the surprise was that oftentimes the dartboard won. So you would have 3 or 4 of the top analysts, and you would have against the dartboard, and sometimes the dartboard wins. So the question is, why do you need the analyst? Now, why would the dartboard win? Again, if all stocks are fairly priced based on market activity, then that's the consensus of the market, and it's pretty hard for an analyst to beat the consensus. Be, the efficient market price. And this is really true most of the time. So that if you buy just a portfolio, a lot of my retirement fund is in an index fund, the Vanguard 500, Vanguard Index 500, 500 largest stocks. And they pretty much make as much money as if I hired an analyst to pick 10 stocks. I do pretty much the same performance, sometimes better, just with my Vanguard 500. Because the stock market itself is mostly efficient, and most stocks, if you just buy them, you're getting a good price. Because if the price was too high, then educated people would not buy it and the price would go down. If the price was too low, then people who know something would not buy it or sell the stock. And would buy it. I had that in the wrong direction. And that would eventually raise the price. Anyway, this efficient market theory is probably accurate most of the time. But there's a lot of anomalies where it doesn't work. Furthermore, the whole engine of efficient markets is based on the theory that we're talking about. If no one followed any of this, then no one would know what they were doing, and stock market prices would be completely inefficient. So there needs to be a group of people who know what they're talking about, who are able to make educated decisions. And in essence, what they do is they drive efficient pricing, and everybody else benefits from that. But there are also anomalies, and there are situations where you can make more money if you make educated decisions. And you can ask somebody like Warren Buffett, who's made billions and billions and billions of dollars on his investments simply because he knows what he's talking about. So you really can't say that I don't need to know anything, because if I just throw a dartboard, I'm going to get 5 good stocks that are accurately priced. That's not necessarily true. It's a little more complicated than that. So management does have incentives to fool around with the numbers, and this is something to be very aware of. It's also something that we have to think about when we look at specific companies. If you see a company that's under particular pressure, or that has a track record of being a little bit iffy with their numbers, it's something to be aware of, and it's perhaps a situation where you might not want to invest in that company. So if you think financial data is a little biased, a lot of companies do bias their numbers, and sometimes we can work with that, and sometimes we don't want to work with it. But oftentimes management will play around with the numbers a little bit, what I call manage the numbers, in order to increase their compensation or to give Wall Street numbers that will improve the stock price. And study after study has shown that this effect exists, and in this course we'll go through some of these studies, and it's something to be aware of. But doing our analysis, as we're going to learn in this class, provides us with many advantages when we make stock investments, so that we're able to make intelligent investments and therefore make more money. Next, we're going to talk about how to analyze profits.